Hello everyone! A couple of weeks ago some screenshots popped up from the PTR. They showed the old raid instance Karazhan, only someone has been busy cleaning it up by removing some cobwebs and removing some skeletons. This got a whole bunch of speculation going, especially with an eye on Warlords of Draenor, since the start of the new expansion could very well be linked to Karazhan. Why, you might ask? Well, that's what I want to discover in this video. Now keep in mind that most of this is going to be speculation, and for all we know the developers are just having a laugh and they're making these changes to get us all crazy. There are reasons to believe why Karazhan could be linked to Warlords of Draenor, and, well, let's just see how far we can go. The best explanation given about the nature of Karazhan, what's going on there, is given in the novel The Last Guardian. In that novel, the guardian Medivh had taken on an apprentice named Khadgar. And Khadgar, as he made his way through the tower, received a vision. And these visions happened more often in the tower, only this time this vision was of himself. And what he saw was an older mage with a white beard on a dry planet and a red sky. This mage was leading human troops against creatures that he had never seen before. Creatures that were actually orcs. When he looked at this mage and their eyes locked, he was stunned because those eyes that he saw in the face of this mage, those eyes were his own eyes. So what he saw was a vision of a possible future. He talked about this with Medivh, and Medivh was the one who opened up the portal for the orcs to invade Azeroth way back when, and he did this because he was corrupted by Sargeras. So as they were talking, Medivh was very interested in this, a vision about his invading force. That's awesome, he wanted to know more about this. And as they were talking, he explained the nature of Karazhan and what's going on with time and vision and realities. I'll read you a part out of the book. That this tower is a place of power should not surprise you. Mages gravitate towards such places. Such places are often where the universe wears thin, allowing it to double back on itself, or perhaps even allowing entry to the twisting nether and to other worlds entirely. Was that what I saw then? Interrupted Khadgar. Another world? Medivh held up a hand to hush the younger man. I'm just saying that there are places of power which for one reason or another become the seats of great power. One such location is here in the Redbridge Mountains. Once long ago something powerful exploded here, carving out the valley and weakening the reality around it. And that's why you sought it out, prompted Khadgar. Medivh shook his head, but instead said, that's one theory. You said there was an explosion long ago that created this place, and it made a place of magical power. You then came... Yes, said Medivh, that's all true, if you look at it in a linear fashion. But what happens if the explosion occurred because I would eventually come here, and that place needed to be ready for me? Khadgar's face knitted. But things don't happen like that. In normal worlds, no they do not, said Medivh. But magic is the art of circumventing the normal. That's why the philosophical debates in the halls of the Kirin Tor are so much buffle and blow. They seek to place rationality upon the world and regulate its motions. The stars march in order across the sky, the seasons fall one after the other with lockstep regularity, and men and women live and die. If that does not happen, it's magic, the first warping of the universe, a few floorboards that are bent out of shape, waiting for industrious hands to pry them open. But for that to happen and the area to be prepared for you, started Khadgar, the world would have to be very different than it seems, said Medivh. Which it truly is, after all. How does time work? Khadgar was not thrown as much by Medivh's apparent change of topic. Time? We use it, trust it, measure it. But what is it? Medivh was smiling over the top of his cup. Time is a regular progression of instants, like sands through an hourglass, said Khadgar. Excellent analogy, said Medivh. One I was going to use myself, and then compare the hourglass with the mechanical clock. You see the difference between the two? Khadgar shook his head slowly as Medivh sipped on his wine. Eventually the mage spoke. No, you're not daft, boy. It's a hard concept to wrap your brain around. The clock is a mechanical simulation of time, each beat controlled by a turning of the gears. You can look at a clock and know that everything advances by one tick of the wheel, one slip of the gears. You know what is coming next, because the original clockmaker built it that way. Alright, said Khadgar, time is a clock. Ah, but time is also an hourglass, said the older mage, reaching for one planted on the mantle and flipping it over. Khadgar looked at the timepiece and tried to remember if it was there before he had brought up the wine or even before Medivh reached for it. The hourglass also measures time, True, said Medivh. Yet here you never know which particle of sand will move from the upper half to the lower half at any instant. Were you to number the sands, the order would be slightly different each time. But the end result is always the same. All the sand has moved from the top to the bottom. What order it happens in does not matter. The old man's eyes brightened for a moment. So? He asked. So, said Khadgar, you're saying that it may not matter if you set up your tower here because an explosion created the valley and warped the nature of reality around it, or that the explosion occurred because you would eventually become here, and the nature of the universe needed to give you the tools you wanted to stay. Close enough, said Medivh. So what these visions are then? Are bits of sand? Said Khadgar. Medivh frowned slightly, but the youth pressed on. If the tower is an hourglass and not a clock, then there are bits of sand, of time itself, that are moving through it at any time. These are unstuck or overlap each other so that we can see them, but not clearly. Some of it is part of the past, some of it is part of the future. Could some of it be of other worlds as well? Medivh was now thinking deeply himself. It is possible. Full marks, well thought out. The big thing to remember is that these visions are just that. Visions. They wafted in and out. Were the tower a clock, they would move regularly and be easily explained. But since the tower is an hourglass, then they don't. They move at their own speed and defy us to explain their chaotic nature. Medivh leaned back in his chair, which I, for one, am quite comfortable with. I could never really favor an orderly, well-planned universe. Khadgar added, but have you ever sought out a particular vision? Wouldn't there be a way to discover a particular vision and then make sure that it happened? Medivh's mood darkened. Or make sure it never comes to pass, he said. No, there are some things that even a master mage respects and stays clear of. This is one of them. Are you confused yet? I hope so, because this explanation is pretty damn vague. Something exploded, created a crater, carved out the valley, and created a place of power. Someone built Karazhan on this location, we're not sure who built it, and eventually Medivh would inhabit the tower. He explains the explosion as something that happened because he would eventually arrive. So all the events, as in the universe wanted it to be ready for Medivh to take his place. Which kinda takes out the rules of reality and time and bends it and morphs it and makes it more fluid, but that's the explanation given. No matter why or how this all happened, we know that it did, and that time within Karazhan is a little bit messed up. Eventually, throughout the story, Khadgar would invent a spell that would allow him to summon these visions at will, which he used to figure out who exactly led the Orcish horde into Azeroth. When he and Gorona half-Orcan, who in the meantime also made their way to the tower, when they saw this vision, they first couldn't believe it. But then Medivh showed himself, and they could see two shadows behind him. One was a shadow of his own, and the other of something much, much darker. By that time, they had figured out that something was up, that Medivh was not all that he seemed to be, and Khadgar summoned a vision of Medivh's mother, Aegwynn, a vision where she confronted Medivh and asked why he let the orcs into our world. They battled, former Guardian Aegwynn against the Guardian Medivh, mother against son, and although Medivh outpowered her greatly, he could not kill her. The spirit of the real Medivh was trying to hold back Sargeras, but he did manage to teleport Aegwynn out of the way. As the real Medivh was watching this vision, and you gotta imagine that there were like two spirits in the body of Medivh, one the real good Medivh and one was Sargeras, the Titanic Demon Lord. So the real Medivh was watching this vision and he let out a howl of a lost soul, screaming to the heavens for forgiveness that will never be forthcoming. With Medivh distracted, Gorona and Khadgar managed to escape the tower and eventually make their way to Stormwind. There they sought out the help of Anduin Lothar, who followed them back to Karazhan. Once they made their way back, they searched for Medivh and they found out that what they'd seen of Karazhan was only half of it. Below Karazhan was a mirrored tower, much like Medivh himself. It was almost as if the top of Karazhan represented the real Medivh and below it represented Sargeras within him. Where up above an empty meeting room would be, down below was a dungeon bedecked with unoccupied iron chains. Where a banquet hall stood unused above the surface, down below there was a room scattered with waste and marked with mystic circles. As they made their way down, another vision appeared, one of future Gorona assassinating the king of Stormwind. Gorona herself didn't understand this vision, she had only received respect from the king and she saw him as a friend. Despite that, despite not wanting to do this at all, like all of them, this vision would eventually come true. So they made their way through the tower and they found Medivh, and it was time for the final confrontation with the corrupted Guardian. In this battle, Medivh literally sucked the life out of Khadgar, turning him into the old man that he had seen in his vision. Despite that, Khadgar did manage to strike Medivh in his heart, and as he did, Medivh said, "Thank you. I fought it for as long as I could." Then the Master's Mage's face began to transform, the head turning fully to flame, the horns sprouting from his brow. With the death of Medivh, Sargeras finally came fully to the surface, and as he was transforming, Lothar stood up, raised his blade, and decapitated his old friend. It was like unstopping a bottle, for everything within Medivh rushed out at once through ragged remnants of his neck. A great torrent of energy and light, shadow and fire, smoke and rage, all spilling upwards like a fountain, splashing against the ceiling of the underground vault and dissipating away. With the death of former Guardian Medivh, the immediate threat of Sargeras was gone, but his plans were already in motion. The portal was still open, and the Orcish invasion of Azeroth still had to be stopped. Now that's a completely different story. At that time, the story of Medivh and Karazhan came to an end. The war against the Orcs unfolded, the Alliance managed to push them back to Draenor, and even close the portal behind them. The next time that we saw Medivh was in Warcraft 3, where he, disguised as a prophet, tried to warn the world of the coming invasion by the Burning Legion. Now you might wonder, how's that possible, since Medivh was slain in the story? Well, Medivh's mother, Aegwynn, made her way back to Karazhan. Remember that he didn't kill her, he just teleported away, so she gathered all that magical energy, made her way back to Karazhan, back to the grave of her one and only son. She used the power that she had managed to gather over the years to resurrect Medivh, and resurrection lore-wise is not as easy as the game shows it to be. It's a very rare thing, and only incredibly powerful beings are able to do it. With his second chance, Medivh tried to set things right, tried to make amends for what he had done while under the influence of Sargeras. But before he made his journey, he first paid a visit to Karazhan. A single tear ran down the side of Medivh's face. So much sacrifice, so much pain, both to keep the plan of the Guardians in place, and then so much sacrifice to break that plan, to break the world free of its lockstep, to bring about true peace. And now even that was at risk. Now one more sacrifice would have to be made. He would have to pull the power from this place if he would succeed in what was to come, in the final conflict with the Burning Legion.
The sands of time have run out, son of Durotan. The cries of war echo upon the winds. You must rally the Horde and lead your people to their destiny.
Medivh sucked the power out of the tower, and with it he took the visions, the memories of the place with him. He then transformed into a crow and sought out the race of Azeroth to warn them, as we've seen in Warcraft 3. You would imagine that by doing this, Karazhan would no longer be a place of power or of interest. But in the Burning Crusade, the tower opened up, and we got a chance to see it from the inside. With this new raid came new enemies looking for the power and the secrets of Karazhan. Just a small recap of what we know so far. We know that Khadgar has been in the tower. He has been taught by Medivh himself the ways of the mage. He has been in the tower, he has discovered its secrets, and he was able to summon these visions. We know that Medivh was corrupted, that there was like a duplicate of the tower below the ground, which was mirrored to the real tower, where the top was like the real Medivh and below it was like Sargeras. We know that time itself does not exactly work the same within that crater, within the tower of Karazhan, and we know that it's a place of power. Now here's where the story gets fuzzy. The Burning Crusade had sort of a story behind it, but nothing really consistent, and a lot of room is left for speculation. When you look up the description of Karazhan that they gave at the time, it says the following. The Tower of Karazhan once housed one of the greatest powers Azeroth has ever known, the sorcerer Medivh. Since his death, a terrible curse has pervaded the tower and the surrounding lands. The spirits of nobles from nearby Darkshire reportedly walk its halls, suffering a fate worse than death for the curiosity. More dangerous spirits wait within Medivh's study, for it was there that he summoned demonic entities to do his bidding. However, the brave and foolish are still relentlessly drawn to Karazhan, tempted by rumors of unspeakable secrets and powerful treasures. Forge a group of 10 stalwart heroes and journey to the tower in Deadwind Pass. But be warned that only those who have achieved level 70 should dare enter. So what was actually going on back then? Why did we go to Karazhan? Well, it's hard to say really. I found an article from Know Your Lore that says the following. We went to Karazhan because the Kirin Tor were investigating the tower and asked Khadgar for help. They had noticed that decades after Medivh's death, some new malevolent force was infesting the tower. And since it sits on a ley line nexus, that concerned them. And as we investigated the tower, we discovered the horrible truth. The Burning Legion has infested Karazhan and seeks control over the powerful arcane secrets held within, and they must be stopped. You have to imagine that these ley lines, they're like lines of magical power that run across all over Azeroth. There was a questline in Northrend where you had to investigate these ley lines, and Archmage Alturus, who's standing outside of Karazhan, says the following. If you traced the ley lines traversing Azeroth, you would find that they all converge right about here, and he points to the tower. The Burning Crusade is set in the timeline after Warcraft 3, so that's after the moment that Medivh sucks all this power out of the tower. So it's very possible that Karazhan still holds an important role for those who seek power, despite Medivh taking all that magic with him. If we take a look at the bosses inside of Karazhan and the lore behind them, well, it's all over the place. We have a Titan Keeper, the Maiden Virtue, who somehow, someway made her way into Karazhan. We have Morus, who was the steward of the tower for Medivh. He is also part of the Last Guardian book, and Medivh actually kills him, and now he's been resurrected by the Burning Legion to fight once more. We have the Shade of Aran, who's Medivh's father, and for some reason he popped up with his spirit inside the tower. We have a chess event that replays the first war between Stormwind and the Orcs, and we have demons, probably summoned by Medivh, or perhaps they took up residence later. It's all over the place, which makes Karazhan really cool, but it doesn't help with figuring out the story that we're trying to tell. There is one boss who is really interesting when it comes to the connection of Karazhan to Warlords of Draenor. He is the final boss of the raid, Prince Melkazar, and he has some interesting things to say.
All realities, all dimensions are open to me. Simple fools, time is the fire in which you'll burn. The celestial forces are mine to manipulate. Who knows what secrets hide in the dark? Ah, yes, I do.
All realities, all dimensions are open to me. Time is the fire in which you'll burn. This to me implies that time is still a fluid concept within Karazhan, as Medivh explained to Khadgar. When you look at Melkazar's loot list, he drops one item that seems rather strange.
Look here, he left his weapon behind.
Gorehowl.
Gorehowl, the weapon first used by Grom Hellscream and later passed on and abandoned by Garrosh Hellscream. So how is it possible that there are two Gorehowls in the world? This question has been asked a lot, and I still think that they simply messed up and didn't realize that they later wanted to give Gorehowl to Garrosh. But what if they didn't mess up, or perhaps found a way to cover up their mistake? What if Melkazar used the powers given by the tower to travel through time? Use the power of those ley lines, the power of the tower, to manipulate reality, manipulate dimensions, and collect Gorehowl from somewhere in the future, or maybe a duplicate from a different reality. If you can go with that idea, then Karazhan still has some power left and perhaps a very important role for the next expansion. We know that in Warlords of Draenor, Garrosh together with Kairoz go back in time and create an alternative reality with an iron horde that's going to invade our planet. The dark portal is going to turn red and they're going to try and take over our Azeroth. Looking at all this history of this tower, the location where the ley lines of Azeroth connect, the loot that drops and all these little hints and clues, what better place than Karazhan to manipulate time and find notes on how to manipulate the Dark Portal. Remember that it was Medivh under the influence of Sargeras who made the Dark Portal. He was the one who contacted Gul'dan and told him how to build the portal on Draenor's side. In this new reality, that moment should not happen, unless they change the events as we know them. Other than that, that moment should not happen, so perhaps they can find some information inside of Karazhan that Gul'dan could use. Or perhaps they're going to make Karazhan that staging area for us, that's that suicide mission they were talking about, because we know that Khadgar is coming with us. We know that he was able to manipulate the visions within the tower. Why couldn't he do more? Why not use the power of Karazhan to create a way to Iron Horde Draenor? I can imagine that the Dark Portal is going to be protected by the Iron Horde. If you make a connection between realities, if that's your way of invading a planet, then you want to get that protected and guarded, and you want to station some troops so that you don't lose that portal. If you go by that idea and the idea of trying to dismantle the Iron Horde from within, then you'll need an alternative route into the Draenor that Garrosh created. I believe that Karazhan could be the perfect place for it, and if they're going to do it, I hope they're going to do it in the form of scenarios, like we've seen on the Isle of Thunder, where you get these individual scenarios, each telling a different story. I think that would be great. I also hope that they won't revamp Karazhan, because I love the raid the way it is. I wouldn't like it to see it changed, because there are a couple of pets to collect there. I would just like to have a raid and a separate scenario to go with that, so that my old beloved Karazhan just stays the same. This is all wild speculation though. For all we know, the developers are just having a laugh with cleaning up some stuff and changing a couple of names, and they might not use Karazhan at all. I thought it was just fun to speculate and tell you a little bit about the history of Karazhan, to think about what they might do with this brilliant raid. So with this information, right, with Medivh and Karazhan and Khadgar, all that good stuff, what do you guys think? Would you like them to use Karazhan? Would you like it to be a scenario? Would you like it to be a new heroic dungeon? Or would you like them to just leave Karazhan alone and give us a different way of going to this Iron Horde Draenor? I would love to hear what you guys have to say. I'll link a couple of articles in the description if you want to read more. If you want full details on the story of Medivh and the opening of the Dark Portal and all of this story, get the book called The Last Guardian. It's a great book. It's written by Jeff Grubb. And I think this is his only Warcraft novel, but I thought it was brilliant, and it shows a little bit into the mind of Medivh, and it made Medivh one of my favorite characters. So if you want more details, get that book. And yeah, that's all I have to say really. I think I've been rambling on for long enough, so let me know what you think. Subscribe if you like my videos, and until next time guys, see ya!
Please, no more! My son! He's gone mad! I'll not be tortured again! Who are you? What do you want? Stay away from me! At last, the nightmare is over.